Lights flickered on the classroom ceiling, in patterns that only I seemed to see. They moved in winding lines, forming shapes invisible to anyone else. It wasn't just the light. It was the sound of the fans, the feel of the wooden desks, the faint smell of paint from the plastic chairs. All of it created a sensory mosaic that swallowed me whole. I was so immersed that I jumped when I heard Mr. Thompson's voice. "Elliot, are you paying attention?" My hands froze, and my head spun toward him. The whole class was staring, and I felt my face heat up. "Sorry." "I didn't hear," I mumbled. A muffled laugh came from one of the back rows. "Jake, of course. Always him. He was busy in his own world," Jake said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The laughter grew. I tried to ignore it, but his words stuck with me. His world. They said it like it was a bad thing, but they didn't know what my world was like. A place full of color and movement. I didn't want them to know. After school, the walk home was the quietest part of my day. The trees swaying in the wind, the leaves brushing against each other, the distant sound of cars passing. This was good. The controlled chaos of everything made me feel more connected. My mom, Sarah, was in the kitchen when I got home, stirring something in a pot. When she saw me, she smiled. "How was your day, Elliot?" "It was normal," I lied. She set the spoon aside and looked at me carefully. "Jake again." I nodded without looking at her. She sighed and came over, kneeling down to hold my hands. "Elliot, I know it's hard, but you're not what he says. You have something special, something that few can see." I wanted to believe her. She always said that. But at school, special seemed like a bad word, something that set me apart from everyone else. At night, in my room, I turned on the LED lights my dad had given me years ago. The ceiling lit up with flashing patterns. This was my safe place, where I could just be. The change began during an art class. Mr. Thompson asked us to draw something inspired by what we saw around us. While the others picked up their brushes and pencils, my eyes locked on the ceiling. The fluorescent lights were flickering in an almost imperceptible way, but to me it was like a dance show. I grabbed a pencil and started to draw. The lines flowed effortlessly across the page, creating patterns I couldn't explain. Curves, dots, and shapes that mimicked what I saw. It wasn't something planned. It was just what felt right. When I looked up, Mr. Thompson was standing beside me, holding his chin while examining my drawing. "Did you do this just now?" he asked. I nodded, not sure what to say. "Elliot, this is amazing." He held the drawing as if it were something precious. "Have you ever thought about showing this?" "Show it?" "Yes, in the community gallery. They're organizing a local art exhibition, and I think your work would be perfect." The ground felt unstable beneath me. Show it? Share my drawing with strangers? I could barely handle the people in my class. "I don't know if I can," I whispered. "Think about it," he said with an encouraging smile. "Your work deserves to be seen." The idea stayed with me for the rest of the day. When I got home, my mom noticed my silence. "What happened?" she asked while preparing dinner. I explained what Mr. Thompson had said, and her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "That's wonderful, Elliot. You should do it." But the fear was still there, strong and present. What if they don't like it? What if they laugh? She sat beside me and held my hand. "Elliot, it's not about what they think. It's about sharing how you see the world. And that's something only you can do." I spent the night staring at the lights on my bedroom ceiling. The idea was frightening, but also intriguing. A small part of me wanted to try. The next morning, I looked for Mr. Thompson before class. "I'm going to do it," I said, trying to hide my nervousness. He smiled. "You won't regret it." And so, without knowing exactly what to expect, I took the first step toward something that would change everything. The following days were intense. Mr. Thompson took care of the administrative details to include my drawing in the exhibition, while my mom helped transform the small sketch into something bigger. The idea was to create a large panel, with vibrant lines and LED lights flashing in patterns. The goal was to make people see the world the way I saw it. My mom brought rolls of paper, paints, brushes, and even a new set of lights that we could integrate into the panel. "Think of this as an extension of you, Elliot," she said excitedly. "Show people what you see." As she spoke, I felt pressured. Not by her, but because I wanted to live up to her faith in me. The first nights of work were exciting. Sitting on the floor of the room with my mom beside me, adjusting colors and details, gave me a strange sense of purpose. However, as the days passed, the excitement began to be replaced by stress. A mistake in the color pattern left me frustrated. Then another detail didn't seem right. Every brushstroke felt wrong, and the pressure to finish on time grew. "This isn't working," I suddenly shouted, throwing the brush on the floor. The sound echoed through the room, shocking my mom. She came closer, kneeling beside me. "Hey, calm down," she said, her voice soothing. "You're carrying too much at once. How about we take it step by step?" "But it won't be good." I felt tears welling up, the familiar sense of overwhelm growing inside me. She placed her hand on my shoulder. "It doesn't have to be perfect, Elliot. It just needs to be yours." Still, it was hard to continue. During my session with Dr. Harper, I vented about how finishing the project seemed impossible. "Break it down into smaller parts," she suggested, drawing circles on the whiteboard in her office. "Focus on one detail at a time. That way, it won't feel so overwhelming." I went home with that idea in mind. My mom and I reorganized the work, breaking it into small steps. Slowly, the panel started to come to life again. At school, however, things weren't getting better. Jake seemed to be everywhere, always ready with some sarcastic comment. "So, you're going to show that crazy drawing of yours?" he asked in the hallway, laughing with his friends. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply walked past him. But his words echoed in my mind. What if everyone laughed like he did? That night, my mom found me sitting in my room, staring at the lights on the ceiling. "Jake again?" she asked, sitting beside me. I nodded without speaking. "Remember one thing, Elliot," she said. "What Jake thinks doesn't matter. What matters is how you feel about what you're creating. The rest is just noise." I wanted to believe her, and little by little I started to try. As the panel took shape, something started to change inside me. I began to think about how I saw the world and why it was so different. To me, the lights and sounds were like a secret language. They formed stories that no one else could see. I had never thought of it as something special before. It always seemed more like a burden, something that separated me from others. But now, with the panel, I was turning it into something that maybe could be shared. I talked about it with Dr. Harper during our next session. "Do you think they'll understand?" I asked. "Completely understand? Maybe not," she replied. "But I think they'll feel something. And sometimes, feeling is more important than understanding." Those words stayed with me. As I painted the panel and adjusted the lights, I started to realize that I didn't need to explain everything. I just needed to give people a glimpse of what I saw. My mom, as always, was my greatest support. She spent the nights with me, watching as I tested different combinations of colors and lights. "It's looking beautiful, Elliot," she said one night, her voice full of pride. "Do you think people will like it?" I asked. "I think they'll feel it," she replied. "And that's more important." Still, the fear didn't completely disappear. The idea of exposing myself was terrifying. What if no one understood? What if everyone laughed like Jake? The night before the exhibition, I sat on the floor of my room, surrounded by the flashing lights that always brought me comfort. I looked at the patterns they created on the ceiling, trying to find courage. Maybe this will be enough, I thought. Even if they don't understand, at least I showed them. That thought helped me sleep. It wasn't certainty, but it was enough to keep going. The next morning brought with it a knot in my stomach that didn't seem to loosen. I was about to show my world to others, and for the first time it didn't feel just scary, it felt important. The day of the exhibition arrived, bringing with it a whirlwind of emotions. My mom woke me up early, preparing a hearty breakfast, pancakes with syrup, my favorite. But the knot in my stomach was so big that I could barely eat. "You're going to rock it today," she said, placing a hand on my shoulder as I pushed the food around on my plate. I just nodded, still trying to process what was about to happen. We arrived at the community gallery well before the event started. The space was larger than I had imagined, with spotless white walls and carefully positioned lights to highlight the artwork. My piece was placed near the entrance where no one could miss it. It was a large panel, full of vibrant lines and LED lights flashing in controlled patterns. Mr. Thompson was there, adjusting event details. When he saw my mom and me, he came over with a smile. "It's incredible, Elliot," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I looked at the panel, trying to see what he saw. To me, it still seemed incomplete. There were so many layers in my world that I wanted to show, but I didn't know how. As the opening time neared, more people began to enter. The sounds of voices, footsteps, and laughter filled the space, growing in volume until they became a constant hum in my head. Nervousness took over. "Are you okay?" my mom asked, noticing my rapid breathing. "It's too much noise," I whispered. She knelt beside me. "Remember, you're not alone, and what you've created here is special. Take a deep breath." I followed her advice, focusing on the pattern of the lights on the ceiling. The familiar movement helped calm me down a little. Then it started. People began to gather around my panel, watching the flashing lights and colorful shapes. I was far away, but I could hear parts of their conversations. "It's like energy in motion," one woman said. "It's different, but beautiful. He's showing how he sees the world," another person commented. These words should have made me happy, but instead, I felt vulnerable. They were seeing something so personal, so intimate. It was as if they were looking directly into me. Suddenly, something went wrong. As I adjusted the remote to change the light patterns, the system froze. The lights began to flicker uncontrollably, then went out completely. The sound of murmurs grew around me, and panic took over. "It's okay, Elliot," my mom said, trying to calm me. But it didn't feel okay. I felt my body freeze. The overload began to take over. The noise, the lights out, people staring. Everything seemed to close in around me. That's when someone unexpected appeared. "Hey, calm down," said a familiar voice. "Jake." He was holding the remote I had dropped. "Maybe I can help," he said, kneeling beside the panel. I stared at him, confused. Jake? The same guy who always made fun of me was now here, trying to fix something that meant so much to me? He calmly adjusted the wires, not seeming bothered by the stares of others. After a few minutes, the lights started working again. He smiled and handed me the remote. "Done. It's fixed," he said. I was still in shock. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, finally finding my voice. He shrugged, looking away. "Because what you're doing is cool. And, well, I was a jerk before. I wanted to make up for it." Something in his voice seemed genuine, and for the first time I saw Jake in a different way. With the lights working again, something shifted inside me. The chaos from before seemed to pass, leaving behind a sense of relief and courage. For the first time, I felt like I wanted to connect with the people around me, even if it was scary. My mom approached, smiling. "You should talk to them, Elliot. Tell them how you see the world." My heart raced. Speak? In front of all these people? The idea seemed impossible. But, looking at the panel, something pulled me forward. I took a step, then another until I was standing next to my work. People noticed and turned to look at me. I felt the weight of their gazes, but I breathed deeply, remembering my mom's and Dr. Harper's words. I know what you're seeing might seem strange. I began, my voice hesitant, but this is how I see the world. To me, the lights and colors are never still. They dance, they move, they tell stories. The words came out faster than I expected. It wasn't a planned speech, but it felt right. "Sometimes it's beautiful," I continued. "Other times it's too much. But I wanted to show this to you because it's a part of who I am." The silence that followed was terrifying, but then someone started clapping. Soon, more people joined in. The sound grew, echoing through the gallery, but this time it didn't feel overwhelming. Felt welcoming. I looked at my mom, who was smiling with tears in her eyes. Mr. Thompson seemed proud, And to my surprise, Jake was also clapping, a genuine smile on his face. After the event, Dr. Harper came to me. "You did something incredible today, Elliot," she said. "You didn't just show your world. You also showed that you can face what seems impossible." Those words stayed with me, not because I had proven something to others, but because, for the first time, I felt like I had found a way to connect with the world without losing who I was. Back home, my mom hugged me for a long time. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. I looked at her and, with a shy smile, said something I had never said before. "I'm proud of me, too." That night, as the lights flickered on the ceiling in my room, I felt like something had changed. It wasn't just about how I saw the world, but how the world, in some way, could see a little bit of me. The days following the exhibition felt like stepping into a new world. At school, people began to notice me, but in a different way. Before, I felt their stares were judgmental, filled with superficial curiosity or mockery. Now they were different, gentle, even respectful. At lunch, a girl I barely knew came up to my table. "Your work at the exhibition was amazing," she said, smiling. I hesitated before responding. "Thank you. You see things so differently. How did you think of that?" she asked. "I didn't exactly think about it," I explained, trying to find the right words. "It's just what I see, every day." She smiled, looking genuinely interested. "Well, it's beautiful. I hope you keep making things like that." Those words stayed with me. Maybe I really could keep doing this, showing my world in ways others could understand. Meanwhile, Jake was visibly changed. He didn't tease me anymore, and he even seemed to seek out my company. During recess, he came over with 2 sodas in hand. "Want one?" he asked, offering me one of them. I looked at him, still trying to understand his change. I accepted the soda, and he sat beside me. "I wanted to say," he started hesitantly, "what you did at the exhibition was impressive. I guess I never realized how you see the world. It's different," I muttered, still skeptical. "But it's a kind of cool different," he continued. "I know I was a jerk before. I think I didn't get it. And when we don't get something, it's easy to make fun of it, you know?" I nodded, feeling like he was trying. It was strange, but in a good way. For the first time, I felt like I might be able to trust him. One morning, an unexpected call changed everything again. The coordinator of the community gallery wanted to speak with me. "Elliot, your piece was a huge success," he said with enthusiasm. "It inspired an idea for the next exhibition. We want the theme to be how we see the world, and we'd like you to lead the project. What do you think?" I almost dropped the phone. "Led? Me? I don't know if I can," I responded, feeling the old fear creeping back. "You've already done something amazing," he said. "Now, imagine the impact you could have helping others show their unique perspectives." My mom was beside me, listening to the conversation. When I hung up, she was beaming. "This is wonderful, Elliot," she said. "But what if I'm not good enough?" I asked, still nervous. She took my hands, her eyes filled with tenderness. "You've already shown that you're capable. And you know what's even more amazing? You can help others do the same." During my next session with Dr. Harper, I told her about the invitation. "It's a big step," she said, tilting her head. "But leading doesn't mean doing everything on your own. It means guiding, inspiring. You've already done that at your exhibition, even without realizing it." Her words gave me courage. I accepted the invitation, and the following weeks were a whirlwind of activities. Working with other young people, each with their own unique visions of the world, was a transformative experience. There was a girl who used music to express how she perceived the emotions around her. Another boy made sculptures from recycled materials, saying he saw beauty in things others discarded. Jake also volunteered to help. "I'm not good with art," he said with a shy smile, "but I can help with the wires, and maybe come up with some ideas." With his help, and the support of my mom and Mr. Thompson, the project began to take shape. On the night of the new exhibition, I stood by the group as people entered and admired the works. The noise was still loud, the lights were still intense, but this time it didn't feel overwhelming. I felt something different. Belonging. When the exhibition ended, the coordinator came up to me, smiling. "You did an amazing job, Elliot. This project went beyond expectations." Back home, I sat in my room, surrounded by the lights that had always been my refuge. As I adjusted the patterns on the ceiling, I thought about how much things had changed. It was no longer just about what I saw. Now, it was about sharing and, in some way, finding connections I never thought were possible. My mom came into the room holding 2 cups of tea. "Are you thinking about the next project?" she asked, smiling. "Maybe," I responded, smiling back. She sat beside me. "Remember, Elliot, you have a gift. The world needs people who see the way you do." "What if the world doesn't understand?" I asked. "Then you keep showing them," she said, holding my hand. My journey was just beginning. The world was still loud, bright, and full of layers that few could perceive. But now I knew I could turn it into something meaningful. Each pattern, each flashing light was an opportunity to create connections, and, above all, to connect with myself. As the lights danced on the ceiling of my room, I smiled, thinking, I can't wait to see where this journey will take me next.